My name is Alyssa Hart, and I was 32 the night I watched my future curl into ash. The video autoplayed before my brain caught up. My brother Mason, jaw set, shirt unbuttoned, like he'd dressed for a victory lap, fed my deed to the fireplace in our childhood living room. Behind him, my father Edward leaned against the mantel with a tumbler of scotch and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The flame licked paper, edges blackened. My name, Alyssa M. Hart, wrinkled, blistered, vanished. A caption slid across the screen like a sneer. "Thanks for the house, sis. Dad's putting it in my name tomorrow." For a second, the room around me, the one bedroom I shared with a thrifted couch and a rattling radiator, fell quiet in that way only humiliation can make it. The kettle stopped singing. The street noise faded. It was just flame and the soft clink of ice in my father's glass. I had $143 in my checking account. 2 years of wire transfers, $4,500 a month, had starved my life to the bone. Ramen counted as a food group. Friends learned to stop inviting me out because I always said, "Next time." I'd traded birthdays and weekends for emergencies. I never questioned, because that's what you do for family, right? It hadn't started with the house. It started when I was 17 and got my first steady paycheck. "Your mother needs surgery," Dad said, voice low at the end of dinner, as if compassion required conspiratorial lighting. I remember the way the overhead lamp hummed while I logged in and moved the total, all of it, to the joint account. 3 months later, in an argument that detonated over something small, Lydia, my mother, snapped, as if we'd let them cut me open for fun. No surgery. The money had sent Mason abroad for a semester to find himself. So I kept giving. For the failed business, short-term liquidity crunch. For the unexpected baby, Mason couldn't afford, despite his habit of driving cars more expensive than his sense. For the kitchen renovation Lydia deserved after sacrificing her best years. Each ask was dipped in honey. "We're so proud of you, Liz. You're the responsible one. You're saving us." Praise as anesthesia. 2 years ago, Edward called with the good whiskey voice. "Sweetheart, it's about the house. Your grandmother's place. Bank's foreclosing. Paperwork's already started. I can't lose your mother's memories." He sent mortgage statements with numbers that made my throat tighten. $847,000 remaining. We agreed, in words, never in writing, that if I carried the note, the deed would come to me. Clean, simple, family. Every month, I wired the amount that ate my life. Every month, they lived there rent-free, texting selfies from the backyard with captions like "sunset therapy," while my ceiling peeled and my shoes squeaked in monsoon season because I couldn't afford a cobbler. I told myself it would all be worth it when the deed, my deed, had my name. When the house was mine, the way obligation had said I belonged to them. Last week, I made the final payment. Today, I asked for the transfer. Edward laughed. "That's not how families work, Alyssa." I told him I'd call a lawyer. 10 minutes later, Mason sent the video. I watched it again and again. Pain has a way of asking for replays, as if understanding will make it hurt less. It doesn't. But the third time, something else surfaced. A frame, half hidden on the mantel behind Edward's shoulder. It was a photo taken in a law office, all glass and fern, the kind of place that charges in increments too small to be humane. In the photo, Edward, Mason, and a woman I didn't know. A date stamp on the corner, 3 days after my first payment. Heat rose in my chest that had nothing to do with the fire. I paused, pinched, zoomed. The logo on the wall read, "Sterling and Hale, LLP." I knew more about ramen brands than law firms, but even I could tell this wasn't a happy family portrait. It was a transaction. I opened my laptop. The glow painted my fingers blue in the dim apartment as I dug. 2 years of emails, bank statements, text chains with too much heart emoji and not enough honesty. My eyes burned. Hours passed. At 2:14 a.m., I found it. An email from Edward to someone labeled T. Hale. "Once Alyssa pays off the mortgage, we'll transfer it to Mason as planned." As planned. The words tasted like metal. I took a screenshot, then 10 more, because fear makes archivists of us all. My phone buzzed. Another message from Mason. "Don't even think about suing. Dad's lawyer says you made gifts. No contracts. No case." He was right about one thing. There were no contracts. Every transfer carried the label, Family Assistance. My poverty had been polite. I don't know why I answered the call from the blocked number. Maybe some part of me wanted one person, anyone, on my side. Alyssa, the voice was gravel dragged over regret. It's Warren, my father's brother. We hadn't spoken in years. He'd always been the quieter one at holidays, the man who washed dishes while arguments bloomed in other rooms. I need to see you today, he said. There's something about that house you don't know. What could possibly be left to know? My laugh sounded like it belonged to a stranger. Your grandmother's will, he said. The original, the one they told everyone burned in a kitchen fire. A beat. I'm sorry it took me this long. The diner he chose was 40 minutes outside the city, the kind of place where the coffee tastes like a dare. Cracked vinyl booths, pie under domes. Warren slid into the seat, his shoulders sharper than I remembered, his skin carrying that gray fatigue that never sleeps. He didn't waste time. A manila envelope crossed to my side of the table with the softness of a bomb. Open it. The paper inside was stiff with age, edges browned like someone had tried to scorch its memory. Eloise Hart's last will and testament, dated 3 months before she died. My eyes tracked the lines faster than my brain could process. Then they snagged. To my granddaughter, Alyssa Hart, who has always carried my spirit of independence, I devised my residence at 412 Willow Lane to her, in trust for her benefit, together with $340,000 for maintenance and taxes. The booth tilted. I gripped the table because the universe doesn't warn you before it moves. I don't understand, I whispered. Dad said, Your father forged a second will 6 months after she died, Warren said softly. I was there when he had it notarized by a friend. Your mother signed as a witness. I felt the word mother pinch behind my ribs. You knew. I told myself he'd do right by you. He swallowed. I was young, and your father, he has a gift for making wrong feel reasonable. But then I watched him bleed you dry, and now I'm out of time. What do you mean? Stage 4 pancreatic. He said it politely, as if apologizing for being late. I thought fear would keep me quiet forever. Turns out dying is a cure for cowardice. He reached into the envelope and produced banking statements. My trust, emptied 12 years ago. A Porsche I'd hated on sight. A Cabo timeshare I'd seen Lydia brag about on Facebook. Hashtag self-care. He put his phone on the table. A text thread with Edward lit the screen. Edward, Mason moves in next week. Finally got rid of Alyssa's claim. Warren, she paid for that house. You can't do this. Edward, watch me. She was stupid enough not to get anything in writing. Why now, I asked, though part of me already knew. The part that had learned tonight that love without boundaries is a weapon you hand over. Because he can't hurt me anymore, Warren said, and I won't let him keep hurting you. I looked down at my grandmother's handwriting, the curve of the G in granddaughter, the way independence bloomed on the page like she'd known I'd need the reminder. I thought of every wire-labeled family assistance, of the rent I paid so they could live in rooms that were mine, of the way Edward had taught me that a daughter's duty was an ATM with a pulse. The anger that rose wasn't loud, it was clean. What do? I asked, though the answer had already begun to assemble itself like bones reknitting. The photo in the video. The email to T. Hale. The will in my hands. You fight, Warren said. I'll testify to everything. Every conversation, every lie, every dime. On the drive back, the city lights looked different, like someone had turned them from decoration to evidence. At a red light, I texted a number I'd found an hour earlier while rage browsing. Nadia Pierce. Civil litigation and probate. Her website promised precision without mercy. I sent the briefest message of my life. Need emergency action to freeze a house transfer, will forgery, stolen trust, destruction of deed on video. I have the original will. By the time I reached my apartment, she'd replied, Be here at 8. Bring everything. I set the manila envelope on my kitchen table the way you set down a newborn. My phone buzzed again. Noah. I can come over, he offered, voice tentative like a hand extended to someone balancing on ice. I'm okay, I lied. Big day tomorrow. Whatever happens, I'm with you, he said. And maybe it was the late hour, or the way the envelope seemed to warm the room, but I believed him. When the kettle sang again, I didn't shut it off. I let it go. There was something comforting about the sound of water insisting on itself, turning small and ordinary and unstoppable. The deed they burned was just paper. Tomorrow, I'd learn how to burn back. By morning, the panic had burned off, leaving something steadier, like a coastline revealed when the storm passes. I slid Grandma Eloise's will and Warren's texts into a clear binder, added my screenshots, and walked into Nadia Pierce's office carrying a life I finally intended to protect. Her reception smelled like lemon oil and inevitability. Floor-to-ceiling windows, clean lines, no clutter, like someone had edited the room for clarity. Nadia emerged in a charcoal suit and an expression that suggested other people mistook restraint for softness. "Alyssa, come in." I laid the binder on her desk. Nadia didn't interrupt while she read. She annotated in tight surgical notes, dates, initials, arrows linking act to consequence. When she reached the still of my name, wrinkling in flame, her pen pressed hard enough to dot the paper. "All right," she said finally. "We're not negotiating with arsonists." I exhaled. I didn't know I'd been holding my breath since the video. "We have 3 immediate lanes," she continued, counting them off. 1. Emergency restraining order to freeze any transfer of title. 2. Civil action. Fraud, conversion, breach of fiduciary duty, constructive trust. 3. Criminal referral, forgery, wire fraud, destruction of property. She glanced up. "But I need to know how far you want to go." "Far enough that they can't do this to anyone again," I said. My voice surprised me. Calm, not heroic, simply done. Nadia's mouth tipped, almost a smile. "Then we move quickly. I'll draft the TRO petition now and file within hours. Do you have the original will with you?" I tapped the binder. "Warren gave me the original and copies. He'll testify. He doesn't have long." "Then we capture his testimony immediately," Nadia said. She picked up the phone. "Marla, book a video deposition for this afternoon. We'll notarize on site." Back to me. "Text your uncle. I want him here before lunch." I texted Warren. "Bring a sweater. They keep it cold here on purpose." He sent a thumbs up and a coffee emoji. "What about my father's lawyer?" I asked. "His emails mention T. Hale." "Sterling and Hale," Nadia said, unfazed. "They'll posture. If they're smart, they'll try to delay the transfer without admitting fault. If they're arrogant, they'll rush it. Either way, they're not beating a TRO today." She clicked through templates with the ease of a pianist finding a known key. "We'll attach the video stills, your bank wires, the email to Hale, the trust statements. The judge won't love the family assistance labels, but the pattern and the forged will allegation shift the equities." She paused. "Also, record everything. If Edward calls, if Mason texts, if your mother writes, preserve it. Consciousness of guilt has a sound." "Ugly?" I offered. "Distinct," she said. Nadia's paralegal appeared with a notary stamp and a stack of forms. "Sign here, here, and here," Nadia said, tapping. "This appoints me. This authorizes records pulls. This formalizes your declaration." I signed, the pen weighty in my hand. My signature didn't shake. It used to tremble all those years I called the bank to move money I couldn't spare. Today it held. By 10:30, Nadia had filed electronically. At 11:15, we were on a video call with the duty judge, a woman with reading glasses low on her nose and the face of someone who schedules her compassion between exact hours. Nadia argued in clean lines: irreparable harm if transfer proceeds, colorable claims of fraud and forgery, a deed destroyed on video, an original will naming Alyssa the beneficiary. When Nadia mentioned the trust siphoned for a Porsche, the judge's eyebrows did a small, human thing. "Temporary restraining order granted," the judge said. "No transfer, encumbrance, or waste of the property pending further hearing. Set the preliminary for next Thursday at 9. I didn't celebrate. Nadia didn't either. She just nodded like a surgeon hearing pulse restored and already thinking about the next artery. At noon, Warren shuffled in, sweater on, face ashen, but eyes bright with purpose. Nadia eased him into the conference room, looped the mic, and started the camera. "State your name and relation," she said gently. "Warren Hart. Edward is my older brother." He told the story like unspooling wire. The original will, the forged second, the notary who was an old friend who owed Edward favors, Lydia's signature, his own silence wed to fear and family myth. He handed over texts. He named dates. He cried once, not at his cancer, but when he said, "I watched my niece work herself thin because I didn't stop him." That's on me. It's on him, I said from the doorway, but he didn't look at me. He looked at the lens like it was a priest. When the notary stamped the last page, Warren sagged with a relief that scared me. He squeezed my hand. Make it mean something. I will. We'd barely finished when my phone lit up. Edward. I let it go to voicemail. Nadia shook her head. Answer. Put it on speaker. Say I'm recording at the start. I slid to accept. Hello, this is Alyssa. I'm recording. A pause, then the practiced warmth. Sweetheart, this is all a misunderstanding. He didn't say his name. People who sell lies don't brand them. You burned my deed, I said, on video. That was a copy, he said quickly. Your uncle is poisoning you. You know how he is, resentful, always failing. Your mother is heartbroken. He waited. When silence didn't feed him, his tone hardened. Listen to me. If you keep this up, you'll be dead to us. I filed for a restraining order, I said evenly. The transfer is frozen. We have Grandma's original will. Silence. Just the sound of his breath and a distant ice machine clattering in whatever office he haunted. Then, you won't win. You gave gifts. That's what daughters do. And when this humiliates you in court, don't come crying to me. Goodbye, Edward, I said, and ended the call. Nadia had been taking notes as if the words were bullets she'd need to identify later. He didn't deny burning the deed, she said. He attacked the witness and threatened the victim. That's consciousness of guilt. Save the audio. I'll send a preservation letter to Sterling and Hale. We'll also notify Detective Ruiz. This is stepping into criminal. The door cracked open. Noah peeked in, hair damp from rain, a paper bag in his arm. Food, he said, almost apologizing for the intrusion. I figured lawyers forget to eat. He caught himself. Sorry. If this is a bad time, I can... It's a good time, Nadia said briskly, already back at her laptop. Leave the bag and take the client for a 10-minute walk. She hasn't breathed in 4 hours. On the sidewalk, the city was in that lunchtime rush, where people became weather. Noah handed me half a sandwich. I wasn't hungry until I was, the first bite making me realize how long adrenaline had been chewing instead. He didn't fill the air with pep talks. He just matched my pace. I'm scared, I admitted. Not of court. Of what happens to the part of me that always said yes. Maybe she doesn't need to die, he said. Maybe she learns a word your family never taught her. No. I smiled, small and startled. You make it sound simple. It's not, he said. But simple and easy aren't the same thing. Back upstairs, Nadia had a list waiting. Next steps. I'll file the civil complaint by end of day. We'll serve Edward, Lydia, and Mason. We push to schedule Edward's deposition early. Meanwhile, I've pinged Detective Ruiz. He'll want to see the will and the video. We treat your mother's inevitable tears as strategy, not weather. And we assume Mason will try to provoke you digitally. Don't bite. As if on cue, Mason texted, Enjoy your little court stunt. Dad's lawyer says you're embarrassing yourself. Also, Mom's crying. Hope that makes you happy. Nadia read it over my shoulder. Perfect. Screenshots. Jurors understand cruelty when they see it. I forwarded the audio of Edward's call to Detective Ruiz with a short note. Original will attached. Forgery suspected. Deed burn video available. Will bring hard copies upon request. He responded in under 5 minutes. Come by 3 p.m. Bring counsel. At 2:40, we walked into the precinct with a canvas tote full of paper and the quiet certainty of people who have finally labeled the problem correctly. Ruiz looked exactly like his voice. Tidy, tired, sober in a way that suggested he'd seen fraud sand down better people than my father. He listened, asked few questions, and copied the files to an evidence drive. We've had an eye on Edward Hart for a while, he said. Your case gives us clean probable cause. If the will is authentic, the forged one becomes a felony anchor point. We'll start on warrants. Nadia thanked him. I just nodded, because something in me didn't trust Exhale yet. Not until I heard a lock turn on the right door. Outside, the sky had that scraped tin color that makes streetlights blink early. Noah squeezed my shoulder and headed to work. Nadia checked her watch. Take tonight, she said. Sleep if you can. Tomorrow we refine the complaint and prepare for the preliminary hearing. What should I do if they call? I asked. Let them talk, she said. Let them tell on themselves. Back home, I placed the binder on my desk like a lighthouse. The phone blinked with a new voicemail. My mother's voice wavered between performance and plea. Alyssa, baby, we're family. This is all because Warren hates us. Your father, he's not perfect, but he loves you. Think about what you're doing. I saved the message to the folder labeled Evidence. Then I opened a new one, Boundaries. Inside, I wrote a list. Answer only in writing. Record calls. No late-night decisions. Love is not an IOU. The house is mine. At midnight, the city dimmed. I left the kitchen light on anyway, one small square of proof that I could choose what stayed lit. Before bed, I pressed play on Edward's voicemail again, not to hurt myself, but to learn the shape of the threat. The words felt smaller than they had in the morning. Tomorrow we would serve them papers. Tonight, I would serve myself notice. I am not their bank. I am their reckoning. When I woke the next morning, my phone was already buzzing. Messages, missed calls, and one voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. It was Detective Ruiz. Ms. Hart, we've confirmed the will's authenticity through probate records. There's more here than you realize. Call me when you can. I stared at the phone for a long moment before dialing Nadia. She answered mid-sentence, already caffeinated and lethal. Morning, we're moving. The judge signed off on the temporary restraining order overnight. Your parents can't touch that house, not even to mow the lawn. I laughed softly, almost disbelieving. After 15 years, I finally own something my father can't ruin. Not yet, she said, but we're getting close. Ruiz wants to brief us at 10. The precinct felt colder this time, bureaucratic air conditioning and the low hum of a copier somewhere down the hall. Ruiz met us in an interview room, dropping a folder thick enough to bruise the table. Your father's name came up in an older file, he said. We've had multiple complaints over the years. Elderly investors, small business owners, all claiming they were swindled by Edward Hart through something he called Heartstone Development Group. He opened the folder, spreadsheets, photos of checks, even notarized letters. He's been running investment scams for over a decade. Your grandmother's forged will was just another branch on the same rotten tree. My throat tightened. He used my inheritance to fund his scams. Ruiz nodded. And when that dried up, he created the foreclosure story. You weren't his first victim, Alyssa. You were just the most profitable one. Nadia's pen scratched across her legal pad. Can we connect the stolen trust funds to specific purchases? Already did, Ruiz said, flipping a page. Porsche, Cabo timeshare, luxury renovation at the Willow Lane house, all matching withdrawals from the trust account. It's textbook self-dealing. He paused, looking at me. You should also know, we're bringing in a forensic accountant to testify. Dr. Patrice Okonkwo. She's meticulous and has testified in half the financial abuse cases in the county. She'll find every dollar. That afternoon, Nadia's office became a war room. Files stacked in color-coded towers, each one labeled will forgery, fraud, asset conversion, communications. Patrice arrived at 3, tall, sharp, with the quiet certainty of someone who speaks in facts, not guesses. She flipped through my binder, then powered up her laptop. We're going to follow the money like a trail of gasoline, she said. Every transfer, every gift, every fake invoice your father made Mason sign. I'll translate emotion into evidence. Her fingers flew. In an hour, she'd mapped 15 years of siphoning into a single chart. The lines converged into a red box labeled Alyssa Hart Trust, closed, 12, YRS ago. That's the foundation, Patrice said. Now we layer the pattern. He repeats the same scam on other people, which shows intent, not accident. As the day bled into evening, I sat by the window, watching the sky fold into violet. Noah arrived quietly, carrying takeout and 2 cups of coffee. He didn't ask how it went. He just listened. He didn't just steal from me, I said finally. He stole from people who couldn't fight back. And I helped him without even knowing it. Every time I sent money, I was covering his tracks. Noah reached across the table. You trusted him because you were raised to. That's not guilt, that's grooming. The word hit harder than I expected. Grooming. It made sense. My father had trained me to confuse obedience with love, debt with devotion. I don't know who I am without their need, I admitted. You'll find out, he said. You already are. 2 days later, Ruiz called again. We're moving forward with warrants, he said. Bank records, emails, even his accountant. There's also something you should see. At the precinct, he showed us a recording, a conversation from a fundraiser last year, captured by another victim. Edward's voice, loud and proud. Alyssa, she's my safety net, always has been. Smart enough to make money, dumb enough to hand it over. I couldn't breathe. Nadia didn't flinch. That's malice on tape. Ruiz looked grim. We're adding it to the evidence package. With your TRO in place, this gives us leverage to start criminal proceedings. But you need to brace yourself. This will go public soon." By Thursday morning, it did. A small local paper ran a headline: "Local businessman faces fraud allegations. Daughter files civil suit." My inbox filled with messages from numbers I didn't know, some supportive, some venomous. One from Lydia: "Alyssa, please stop. You're killing what's left of this family." I didn't reply. Nadia said, "They'll weaponize shame. Let them." Instead, I focused on Patrice's charts, Ruiz's timelines, Warren's deposition. Every piece of paper was a brick in the wall I was building between who they were and who I'd become. When Nadia called that night, her tone carried something close to satisfaction. "Judge set the preliminary hearing for next Thursday," she said. "We'll go first. Show fraud, forgery, and the trust theft. Warren will testify by video link. Be ready." "Ready," I said, though the word felt foreign in my mouth. That night, I scrolled through old photos, birthdays, holidays, smiling faces. Each image was a lie that used to comfort me. I deleted them one by one until the gallery was almost empty. Before bed, I wrote a note in my phone. "They built a family out of debts. I'll build a future out of receipts." For the first time in years, I slept without setting an alarm. Tomorrow, I wouldn't be waking up to work for them. Tomorrow, I'd be waking up to testify against them. The courthouse smelled like old paper and tension. I'd imagined this day for months, but standing outside the heavy oak doors still felt like stepping into an operating room. Bright lights, cold instruments, truth cut open for inspection. Nadia straightened my collar and whispered, "Remember, calm isn't weakness. It's evidence of control. Let them perform. You tell the truth." Warren was pale on the screen set up beside the judge's bench. The chemo had thinned his voice, but not his resolve. When the bailiff called the case, Hart v. Hart, civil fraud, and will forgery, he lifted his chin. The opposing counsel was exactly what I expected, a slick man in a navy suit who smiled like he'd trademarked insincerity. He introduced himself as Mr. Ralston, counsel for Edward and Lydia Hart, with Mason seated behind them in a crisp suit that didn't fit his guilt. Judge Miriam Keller presided, silver hair, expression carved from patience and deadlines. She gestured toward Nadia. "Ms. Pierce, you may begin." Nadia stood, her voice precise as a scalpel. "Your Honor, the evidence shows a deliberate, long-term pattern of fraud by the defendants, culminating in a forged will, a stolen trust, and the destruction of my client's deed." Ralston interrupted. "Your Honor, the defense objects to these emotional accusations." "Overruled," Keller said, without looking up. "Proceed." Nadia smiled faintly. "As I was saying, 15 years of financial manipulation disguised as familial love." She called Warren Hart first. His image flickered on the monitor as he swore in. He began at the beginning. The real will, Eloise's signature, the night Edward showed him the forged replacement. "He said Alyssa was too young," Warren explained. "He said he'd manage the property for her benefit, but I watched him drain the trust within a year." Nadia guided him gently through the timeline, letting his remorse breathe between facts. When she played the recording of his text exchange with Edward, "She paid for that house. You can't do this. Watch me." The room went still. Even the court reporter's fingers paused mid-air. When Ralston cross-examined, he tried to shred credibility. "Mr. Hart, isn't it true you filed for bankruptcy last year?" "Yes." "And that you stand to benefit if Ms. Hart wins this case?" Warren leaned forward. "I'm dying. I'll be gone before the check clears." The silence that followed wasn't kind, it was honest. Next, Nadia called Dr. Patrice Okonkwo, the forensic accountant. Her presence filled the room without volume. She laid out charts and graphs in a rhythm only she seemed to hear. Dates, withdrawals, deposits, vehicles, vacation homes. "The defendants used Ms. Hart's inheritance as a revolving line of credit," she said. "When that dried up, they invented a foreclosure crisis to extract additional funds, over $108,000 in 24 months. She pointed to a slide of bank transactions. "These transfers correspond directly with luxury purchases, including a Porsche and a timeshare in Cabo San Lucas. Every transaction contradicts their claim of financial hardship." Ralston attempted to rattle her. "You're speculating about intent." Patrice didn't blink. "I'm quantifying theft." When it was my turn to testify, I felt my pulse in my wrists. Nadia touched my arm once before I walked to the stand. I swore in, sat, and tried not to look at my parents, But my eyes found them anyway. Edward's stare was cold calculation. Lydia dabbed at non-existent tears with a tissue that looked rehearsed. Nadia's questions were simple, surgical. At what age did your father first ask for financial help? 17, I said. And did you later learn that money was not used for your mother's surgery? Yes. What was it used for? My brother's semester abroad. Ralston objected. Hearsay. Overruled, Judge Keller said. Nadia continued, calm as snowfall. When you discovered the will forgery, what did you feel? The truth caught in my throat. Like I'd spent half my life auditioning for love I'd already paid for. A whisper rippled through the gallery. She played the video, Mason feeding the deed into the fire, Edward's smirk reflected in the flames. The audio filled the courtroom. Thanks for the house, sis. Dad's putting it in my name tomorrow. Lydia started crying harder, a performance made of moisture, not remorse. Edward's jaw flexed but never cracked. Nadia ended gently. Ms. Hart, why did you bring this case? Because I'm done financing my own abuse. Ralston tried to turn me brittle during cross. Isn't it true you refused your father's advice to go to law school? Yes. And now, conveniently, you're using the system he wanted you to study to punish him? I'm using it to protect myself, I said, and everyone else he conned. Even Judge Keller's mouth twitched. The final witness was Detective Ruiz. He detailed the broader fraud pattern. 17 victims, over $2 million lost. Identical tactics. He ended with the audio from that fundraiser. Alyssa's my safety net. Smart enough to make money, dumb enough to hand it over. When it played, the color drained from Lydia's face. Edward stayed stone. Judge Keller didn't deliberate long. Her ruling was crisp. The court finds probable cause for fraud, forgery, and theft. The matter will proceed to trial. The restraining order remains in full effect. The district attorney is hereby referred this case for criminal prosecution. The gavel hit once, final as a heartbeat. Outside, reporters had gathered. Flashes, microphones, a swirl of noise. I kept walking until I reached the courthouse steps. Nadia caught up, calm but triumphant. That was clean testimony. You didn't let him shake you. I looked up at the clouds. They were low and gray, but the air tasted new. He always said I'd embarrass the family one day, I murmured. I guess he was finally right. Noah appeared at the curb, holding 2 coffees. You did it? For now, I said. The next round is criminal. He handed me the cup. Then drink this like it's armor. For the first time in years, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the sound didn't belong to him anymore. By November, Seattle's rain had become a daily ritual. Steady, gray, cleansing. I'd stopped seeing it as gloom and started seeing it as proof that storms can rinse the air. The civil trial began on a Monday morning. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and curious onlookers. Headline after headline framed me as the daughter suing her parents. Some called me brave, others greedy. The truth was quieter. I was just tired of being their victim. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with the low hum of spectators and the tap of cameras being silenced. Nadia Pierce adjusted her blazer and whispered, "Remember, we're not performing, we're revealing." I nodded, even as I caught sight of them. My parents sat at the defense table, dressed in muted colors, like grief could be worn as strategy. Mason was behind them, glaring at me with that familiar mix of anger and disbelief. The same look he used to give me when I refused to bail him out of his latest disaster. Judge Keller entered. Court is now in session. Nadia opened with the same precision that had carried me this far. Your Honor, this case is not about family drama. It's about systematic deception, a network of lies that spanned 15 years and turned love into leverage. She laid out the foundation, the forged will, the stolen trust, the fabricated foreclosure, and the video of the deed burning. Then she began calling witnesses. First, Warren Hart. He appeared by video again, frailer now, but burning with purpose. His testimony replayed the story of the forged will, the notarization, Lydia's signature, and the years of silence. Ralston tried his usual tactics. Mr. Hart, didn't you once say your brother saved you from a failed investment? Yes, Warren said softly. And then I watched him use that same kindness to destroy his own daughter. When he finished, I could see Judge Keller's jaw tighten. Next, Dr. Patrice Okonkwo. She unfurled her timeline like a map of sin. Every dollar traced, every theft illuminated. The defendants diverted a total of $448,000 from Ms. Hart's inheritance and subsequent earnings, she testified. When the funds ran dry, they staged a foreclosure to solicit additional payments. This was not a mistake, it was a business model. Ralston stood, trying to rattle her. Dr. Okonkwo, you're suggesting my clients intentionally deceive their daughter? She met his gaze. I'm not suggesting, I'm demonstrating. Laughter rippled softly through the courtroom. Then came the victims. Frank Kowalski, 83, hands trembling as he described how Edward had promised him 20% returns. Mrs. Ananguin, speaking through a translator, explaining how Edward had convinced her to invest her late husband's pension. And Geneva Porter, my grandmother's best friend, voice breaking as she said, I trusted him because Eloise trusted him. I was wrong. Each testimony painted another layer of my father's greed. Each one mirrored the same story, charm first, betrayal second. When the recording of Edward's fundraiser boast played, Alyssa's my safety net, smart enough to make money, dumb enough to hand it over. I saw even Mason flinch. Then it was my turn. I took the stand again, hands steady this time. Nadia's questions came slow and deliberate. Ms. Hart, when you discovered the forgery, what was your first thought? That my grandmother had been buried twice, once in the ground, and again under my father's lies. The room went still. Nadia continued, and when you saw the video of your deed burning, I realized my family never loved me. They just loved my obedience. Edward's jaw clenched. Lydia stared down, tissue trembling. During cross-examination, Ralston circled like a shark, sensing weakness. You've benefited financially from this lawsuit, haven't you? I'm recovering what was stolen from me. Wouldn't you say this is revenge? I met his gaze. Revenge is emotional. This is math. That got a chuckle from the gallery. The trial lasted 6 days. By Friday afternoon, the defense had run out of excuses. Edward testified, trying to charm the room the way he always had. He talked about family sacrifices, about how Alyssa misunderstood the arrangement. When Nadia pressed him, he smirked. My daughter is angry. She's twisting the past to hurt us. Nadia held up the will, the real one, yellowed and brittle. This document is dated 3 months before Eloise Hart's death. It names Alyssa as sole beneficiary. Are you saying your mother's signature is fake? He hesitated. I'm saying memories fade. So does ink, Nadia said, but not intent. Lydia tried to follow with tears, claiming ignorance. I didn't know it was forged, she said. Edward told me it was just a copy. Nadia handed her the notary record. You signed it, Mrs. Hart. You witnessed your own daughter's inheritance being erased. Lydia broke then, sobbing into her hands. He said it was for the family. That's the problem, Nadia said quietly. He redefined family to mean himself. Closing arguments came down to truth versus performance. Ralston spoke first, appealing to sympathy. Families fight, Your Honor. They make mistakes. We can't criminalize imperfection. Then Nadia stood. This wasn't imperfection. It was orchestration. Every lie was rehearsed, every signature forged, every dollar taken with precision. The only mistake the defendants made was assuming their daughter would never learn to fight back. The verdict came after only 90 minutes of deliberation. Judge Keller's voice cut through the tension. The court finds the defendants, Edward and Lydia Hart, liable for fraud, forgery, and theft. The total damages are awarded at $448,000 in restitution and $300,000 in punitive damages. The house at 412 Willow Lane is hereby transferred to the legal ownership of Alyssa Hart. The gavel dropped. Lydia gasped. Edward went white. Mason turned away, muttering something I didn't catch. It was done. Outside, cameras flashed again. Reporters shouted questions. Do you forgive your parents? What will you do with the house? I just said, start over. Nadia smiled as we walked to the curb. That's one front closed. Next comes the criminal trial. You ready? I looked up at the rain. Soft, endless, cleansing. I've been ready my whole life. I just didn't know it. That night, I stood alone in front of my grandmother's house. My house now. The porch light flickered. The air smelled of cedar and ghosts. Inside, everything looked smaller than I remembered. The kitchen where Mom used to cry. The den where Dad told his lies. The fireplace where my name burned. I touched the mantle. Not anymore, I whispered. Tomorrow I'd sell it. Tonight, I'd reclaim it. The criminal trial began 6 weeks later, in the same courthouse, but a different atmosphere. This wasn't about repayment anymore. It was about punishment. The state had taken over, and the stakes were higher than anything money could fix. Nadia sat beside me, her posture calm but electric. "This is where they stop being defendants in a lawsuit," she said, "and start being criminals in the eyes of the law." The prosecution wasted no time. They presented the forged will, the fraudulent bank statements, the Porsche, the vacation receipts, the fundraiser audio, the text where my father bragged about keeping Alyssa in line. Detective Ruiz testified first. "We traced the misappropriated funds from the trust through multiple shell accounts. The same pattern repeats in 17 other cases. Each victim describes Edward Hart as charismatic, persuasive, and relentless." The prosecutor turned to the jury. "That's not family. That's a con artist in a father's clothing." Then came the witness tampering revelation, a letter Edward had sent from jail to one of the older victims, offering her money to retract her statement. The courtroom gasped. Even Ralston looked blindsided. Judge Keller's patience thinned. "Mr. Hart, if these actions are proven, you're looking at additional years for obstruction." Edward said nothing. His arrogance had calcified into silence. When Lydia took the stand, she tried to pivot toward remorse. "I didn't know how bad it was," she said softly. "I thought we were borrowing. I didn't understand he'd taken Alyssa's trust fund until it was gone." The prosecutor was unmoved. "You signed the forged will, Mrs. Hart." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I thought it was what his mother wanted." The prosecutor leaned forward. "You were in the room when your mother-in-law said she wanted Alyssa to have the house. You ignored her words and signed a lie." Lydia sobbed harder. "I didn't know what else to do." "Here's what you could have done," the prosecutor said evenly. "Tell the truth." Then it was my father's turn. Edward walked to the stand with the same swagger he'd always had. The bailiff read him in, and he leaned toward the microphone like it was a stage prop. "My daughter," he began, "has taken private family matters and turned them into a circus. I made mistakes, sure, but not crimes. I was trying to keep our family afloat." The prosecutor let him talk, rope extending inch by inch. Then she struck. "Mr. Hart, did you forge your mother's will?" "No. That document was an alternate draft she discussed with me before she died." "Then why is the notary's signature dated 6 months after her death?" The silence was heavy. The jury stared. Even Mason, sitting behind the defense table, looked away. Edward tried to recover. "It must be a clerical error." The prosecutor smiled slightly. "So your mother's ghost visited the notary?" A few jurors chuckled before catching themselves. The prosecutor leaned closer. "Mr. Hart, your daughter gave you over $400,000. Do you consider that family support?" "I consider it love." "And burning her deed?" He hesitated. A moment of anger. "Anger that she expected you to keep your promises?" His jaw clenched. "She's turned everyone against me." "No," the prosecutor said quietly. "You did that yourself." By the time closing arguments came, the evidence was overwhelming. The prosecutor addressed the jury. Edward Hart forged his mother's will, stole his daughter's inheritance, and defrauded 17 victims over 12 years. Lydia Hart witnessed the forgery and helped conceal the theft. They destroyed evidence, lied to banks, and even burned their own daughter's deed. If that's not intent, what is? Ralston's defense was limp, reduced to pleas of misunderstanding and familial conflict. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, Judge Keller asked for the verdict. On the charge of fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of theft, guilty. On the charge of witness tampering, guilty. Lydia broke down completely. Edward stared straight ahead, a hollow king watching his crown melt. 2 weeks later came sentencing. Judge Keller's tone was measured but cold. "Mr. Hart, your conduct shows a sustained pattern of predation. You exploited family, friends, and the vulnerable for your own gain. You've shown no remorse. The court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison." She turned to Lydia. "You enabled this deception, and while you claim manipulation, you still chose participation. You are sentenced to 8 years. And then, to Mason. For cooperation and testimony, the court grants 5 years probation and restitution payments to victims." When the gavel fell, I exhaled for the first time in years. Outside, cameras flashed again. Someone shouted, "Alyssa, do you feel justice was served?" I paused. "Justice doesn't give you your family back," I said. "It just stops them from taking anything else." The following month, I received a single manila envelope from the state clerk's office, the official title transfer for 412 Willow Lane. My house. When I unlocked the front door, the air was stale and silent. Dust floated where laughter used to live. I stood in the living room, the same one where my name had burned, and whispered, "You can't haunt me anymore." I listed the house that same week. It sold in 14 days. After paying legal fees and clearing the last mortgage, I had $623,000 in my account. Not all I'd lost, but enough to start over. I used part of it to pay off my student loans, another part for a small condo downtown, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors. No ghosts, no obligations, just space. That winter, Uncle Warren passed away. The news came in a brief call from the hospice nurse, followed by a letter he'd written days before his death. "Alyssa, I waited too long to be brave. You didn't. You turned our family's shame into truth. Don't let this story define you. Let it free you. Warren." I cried until the ink blurred, not because of grief, but because it was the first time in years someone in my family had written words that meant something. A week later, I received a call from Nadia. "The DA's office will want you to speak at sentencing next month. Victim impact statement." I nodded. "I'll be there." She paused. "You don't owe them forgiveness." "I know," I said, "but I owe myself closure." When the time came, I stood in that courtroom one final time. My parents sat shackled at the defense table. I read from a single sheet of paper. For 15 years, I believed that family meant sacrifice. I worked, I gave, I obeyed. But love without honesty isn't love, it's control. You stole from me because you could, but what you can't steal is who I've become. Judge Keller thanked me and turned to them. "Mr. and Mrs. Hart, your daughter's courage is the only legacy left worth remembering." As the guards led them away, I realized I didn't need revenge anymore. What I needed, and finally had, was freedom. The courthouse echoes followed me for weeks. Every gavel strike, every verdict word, replayed in my head at odd hours. Some nights I woke thinking I still had to send money, that some new family emergency was waiting in my inbox. Then I'd see my name on the condo lease, Alyssa Hart, sole owner, and breathe again. The first thing I bought for the new place was a desk. Not a luxury one, just a solid oak rectangle by a wide window overlooking the river. I framed Warren's letter above it. His handwriting, shaky but steady in meaning, read like a benediction. "Don't let this story define you. Let it free you." I stared at those words every morning as I filled out my law school application. When I told Noah, he laughed softly, almost in relief. "So you're doing it after all?" "Yeah," I said. "But not the way Dad wanted. He saw law as control. I see it as defense." He leaned against this counter, coffee in hand. "You'd be good at it. You already know what injustice looks like up close," I smiled, "and how to dismantle it." He reached across, fingers brushing mine. "You don't owe me an answer, but how do you feel about all this finally being over?" "It's not over," I said. "It's just quieter." 3 months after the sentencing, the house sale closed. I signed the last paper and watched the title clerk stamp it transferred. For once, no one was taking from me. I was letting go by choice. With the money, I paid off my loans, enrolled full-time, and moved into a smaller but brighter condo near campus. The first night there, I didn't sleep. I just listened to silence. It was the kind that didn't demand anything. I wrote in my journal, "I used to think family was a debt you paid forever. Now I think love is only real when it's voluntary." Law school was brutal, but it suited me. Contracts and probate law came alive in a way they never had in Dad's hands. Each statute felt personal, each case study like a ghost whispering, "Here's how you stop another you from happening again." During a seminar on fiduciary duty, I used my own case as an anonymous example. The room went quiet when I finished. My professor, a kind woman with iron gray hair, said, "Whoever that person was, they were extraordinarily brave." I didn't correct her. 6 months later, I received a letter from prison. Lydia's handwriting, delicate, familiar, unbearable. "Alyssa, I don't expect forgiveness. Therapy's helping me see what I became. I was afraid of your father, but I was also greedy. I'm sorry. I hope someday you'll remember something good about me." I read it once, then placed it in the same binder that held the forged will and bank statements. I labeled the folder Archive. Not to forget, just to remember correctly. Mason emailed next. Subject, "Can we talk?" I didn't reply. He sent another, "Please, I'm not Dad." Still, no response. Then a third, "I'm trying to make it right." I wrote back one line, You made your choice when you hit send on that video. Live with it. He stopped writing after that. By my second year of law school, I had joined a victims advocacy clinic, helping elderly clients who'd been financially exploited by family members. I met women who'd lost everything to sons, nephews, cousins, each story a mirror tilted slightly differently. One day, after a long intake session, a client asked me, "How did you learn to stay calm around this kind of pain?" I said, "Practice." What I didn't say was that I'd already survived the worst of it. Graduation came with rain, as if the sky couldn't resist one last metaphor. When my name was called, I felt Warren beside me somehow, whispering, "You did it." After the ceremony, Noah wrapped me in a hug that felt like home. "Top of your class," he said. "Told you so." I laughed. "You also told me to get some sleep once. How'd that work out?" "Still pending," he said, smiling. We celebrated with takeout and cheap champagne in my condo. Between bites, I caught my reflection in the window. Older, sharper, lighter. "This place looks different," Noah said. "It's me," I answered. "I look different." Later that night, after he'd gone, I scrolled through my voicemail folder labeled prison calls. Dozens of messages from my father. "Alyssa, it's your dad. I need help." "Alyssa, please call me back. They're treating me unfairly. You can fix this." I pressed play on the newest one. "I'm sorry, okay? I miss you. I need money for my commissary account." The irony almost made me laugh. I saved it, like all the others, under evidence of cycle. The following week, I met with Nadia for coffee. She'd stayed in touch, part mentor, part friend. "I heard you passed the bar," she said, smiling. "Yesterday." "I knew you would. What's next?" "I'm opening a small practice, financial abuse and elder fraud. I want to be the person I needed at 20. She raised her mug, to burning the past and building something better from the ashes. We clinked cups, and for the first time, I felt the sentence land without bitterness. That evening, I returned home and lit a single candle on my desk. The flame reflected off Warren's framed letter and the clean pages of my first case file. I whispered, "You taught me to fight fire with light." Outside, the rain started again. Soft, steady, almost merciful. 3 years have passed since the trials ended. Seattle has changed. New condos, new coffee shops, but the river outside my window still glints the same way it did the morning after I sold the house. Some mornings I stand there, barefoot, coffee in hand, watching sunlight scatter across the water and thinking, I'm finally living a life that belongs to me. I'm 35 now, a licensed attorney specializing in elder and family financial abuse. My office is small, 2 rooms above a bakery, but it smells like cinnamon and possibility. The sign on the door reads, Heart Legal Advocacy. The irony isn't lost on me. I kept my last name not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that I rewrote its meaning. My first big case as a solo attorney came from a woman named Ruthie Morales, whose father had emptied her college fund to cover gambling debts. Sitting across from her, I saw the same disbelief that once lived in my own eyes. She whispered, I don't know if I can fight him. He's my dad. I said, you can and you'll win. 6 months later, we did. The judge ordered full restitution and additional damages. After the verdict, Ruthie hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. How did you learn to be so strong? She asked. I thought about the teenage girl who'd handed over her first paycheck, the young woman who'd starved herself of joy to keep her parents afloat, the one who'd watched her own name burn in a fireplace. I learned from people who showed me what not to become, I told her. Noah and I still share our lives, steady, simple, honest. He's a high school math teacher who believes kindness is a form of intelligence. We rent a tiny cabin on Whidbey Island once a month and spend weekends reading, hiking, and pretending the rest of the world doesn't exist. He's never asked for a cent, never measured love by what I can give. One night by the fire, he said, You know, for someone who's lived through hell, you laugh a lot. I'm making up for lost time, I said. He grinned. Then keep laughing. A few months ago, Mason tried to contact me again. He sent an email with the subject line, Please hear me out. I hovered over it for a full minute before opening it. Alyssa, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I've been going to therapy. I see now what Dad did. To us, to you. I'm sorry for being part of it. I just wanted what he promised. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here. I didn't delete it, but I didn't respond either. Some doors can stay closed without bitterness. They just no longer lead anywhere worth going. My mother writes occasionally from prison. Her last letter was shorter than the rest. I finally understand the difference between guilt and regret. Guilt is about getting caught. Regret is about the people you lose. I lost you. I'm sorry. I read it once, folded it neatly, and filed it away with the others. I don't know if forgiveness will ever come, but I've stopped needing it. The strangest thing about healing is that it sneaks up on you. It doesn't arrive in grand moments, it shows up in small ones. The first time I filled my fridge without checking my bank balance. The first time I bought flowers for myself. The first time I laughed at a memory of my father and didn't feel guilt attached. That's when I knew I was free. Every Friday, I volunteer at a victim support group downtown. The room is filled with stories that sound too similar to mine: parents draining retirement funds, siblings stealing inheritances, adult children manipulating elders. I tell them what I tell every client. You're not weak for trusting, you're human for hoping. Because that's what I learned through all of it. Trust isn't stupidity, it's faith and decency. It's the world's fault, not yours, when someone uses that faith as a weapon. This morning, I received a call from a journalist doing a feature on financial betrayal and family healing. She asked if I'd be willing to be photographed for the story. I said yes, but only if they shot it here, in my office, beneath the framed letter that hangs over my desk. Warren's words: "Don't let this story define you. Let it free you." Tonight, as I close the office, I pause by the window. The city glows below, traffic like moving veins, rain misting against glass. I think about how my father used to say, "Family is everything." He was right. He just never understood that family isn't inherited, it's chosen. Mine looks different now. Noah, the clients I defend, the older women who call me honey after hearings, even the barista downstairs who saves me an extra croissant on bad days. They're my people, my circle, my family. I still have one of the voicemails from my father. It's the last one he ever left. "Alyssa, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I wanted to tell you I'm proud of you. You always were stronger than me." I don't know if he meant it, but I save it anyway. Not because I need his approval, but because it reminds me that even the man who tried to burn me down ended up acknowledging the fire he couldn't extinguish. When I get home that night, I light a candle on my windowsill. The flame dances against the glass, reflected in the dark river below. It reminds me of another fire long ago, one that destroyed paper, but not the woman who owned her name on it. I whisper to the reflection, "They thought they burned my future, but I built it from the ashes." The candle flickers once, then steadies, bright, unwavering, alive.